District 58, and I proudly represent North and downtown Minneapolis. For several years, I have carried and passed legislation related to foreclosures and the devastation that results. Visitors to my office are used to seeing maps showing the foreclosures by year in Minneapolis. Jaws drop when they see, graphically displayed, the density of foreclosures in my district and the change from year to year. Many comment that there are so many dots overlaid on the other dots that you can't see the base map. Clearly, we are ground zero for foreclosures in our city, our county, and our state. Our mayor says it this way: when Minneapolis gets the sniffles, North Minneapolis gets pneumonia. I'd like to describe the state of my district after years of foreclosure. Thousands of families have lost their homes. They have moved away, or they've moved in with their friends or family. They're still hurting from the loss of that family home, and the opportunity to purchase another home seems a distant dream. The foreclosed upon properties are being repurchased for considerably less than the previous price that was paid. Some families have been able to purchase great houses that are in pretty good shape. Others are buying homes that have been rehabbed with NSP funds. Others are taking a chance and buying a house that could kindly be called a fixer-upper. Many homes have been vandalized, had copper stripped, sometimes had fires, and many of those are now demolished. Other homes are being snapped up by investors. Some of those investors are clueless about how to rehabilitate a house and get good tenants. Others think that the laws really aren't meant for them. They buy a house for pennies, paint some of the walls, maybe they'll scrub the appliances, and then they rent it out. They forget the small details, like maybe the house was condemned, and that there are requirements for lifting the condemnation and getting a new certificate of occupancy and a rental license. A case in point is a condemned fourplex near my home. It was bought by a consortium of investors from North Dakota. The consortium has bought about 50 properties in North Minneapolis, and they hired someone local to get them in shape to rent out. It's now been 8 months since this gentleman started having work done on this building. A couple of weeks ago, he failed what was to have been the final inspection, so it's still condemned. He lied about being an asbestos abatement contractor and illegally and dangerously removed the asbestos himself. And he got caught. I understand, unfortunately, that his work at his other properties is equally shoddy. There are still many blocks in North Minneapolis with more than one vacant house. This proves challenging in the winter especially. The sidewalks might go unshoveled. The pipes will freeze if they haven't been winterized. Sometimes people move in. If the house becomes open to trespass, it will get boarded up. And according to a 2001 study in Philadelphia, houses within 150 feet of a vacant or abandoned property experience a net loss of $7,627 in value, making it more of a burden on the neighboring residents. In addition, a study in Austin, Texas found that blocks with unsecured vacant buildings had 3.2 times as many drug calls to police, 1.8 times as many theft calls, and twice the number of violent calls as blocks without vacant buildings. In 2007, I carried and passed a predatory lending prevention package in the Minnesota Senate. It requires mortgage lenders to verify the borrower's ability to pay the loan, prohibits refinancing that does not benefit the borrower, requires the mortgage lenders to act in the best interest of the borrower, requires that people receive mortgage financial counseling before refinancing a special mortgage like those no-interest loans from Habitat for Humanity. It bans financial penalties for early repayment. It requires a mortgage originator to orally inform a borrower of the additional taxes and fees that are associated with the loans. It allows the borrowers to sue if they are harmed by predatory lending or an overinflated appraisal. And finally, it makes mortgage fraud a specific crime all on its own. Minnesota has also passed several progressive measures to address protections for renters affected by foreclosures. In 2008, I carried a bill that requires landlords to tell prospective tenants that the property is in foreclosure and to waive any penalty if the tenant in the foreclosed property withholds the last payment, the last month's rent. Another bill in 2008 provided for mandatory expungement of an eviction if a tenant vacated a foreclosed property before the expiration of the redemption period, or if the tenant never received the required notice to vacate. We will continue working on renter protections in 2010. Minnesota appreciates the federal resources that have been sent out to the states to address the foreclosure crisis. However, some federal policies actually impede our progress here in the states. For example, federal legislation preempts the state control of federally chartered lending institutions, making state efforts less effective than they would ordinarily be. Our 2007 bills were called the strongest in the nation, but in actuality, only state banks were actually affected. Since most state legislatures are considerably more nimble than Congress, removing the preemption would allow us to do what needs to be done in a more timely fashion than waiting for a federal solution. Thank you again for being here today. We really appreciate your interest in this issue because it affects all of our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you very much.